Imagine a man with no army, no armor, no noble title, standing against the greatest empire of the ancient world, and winning. This is the story of Spartacus, the gladiator who refused to die as entertainment for the Roman crowds and instead decided to turn history upside down. Instead of kneeling in chains, he rose up, and by his side stood thousands of runaway slaves and peasants who together launched the largest slave revolt in ancient history. In this video, we'll dive deep into the full journey of Spartacus, from his modest beginnings to the moments when he crushed entire Roman legions. Spartacus was born in Thrace, a region north of Macedonia, located on the borders of what is now Bulgaria, Greece, and Turkey. The name Spartacus was likely not even his birth name. It was common for slaves to be renamed based on their place of origin. Just as Greeks were often called Greekus and Syrians were called Syrianus, Spartacus carried in his very name the memory of his homeland. But Spartacus was far from being an ordinary barbarian. According to Plutarch, he was intelligent, cultured, and closer to Greek traditions than to the rough tribal image the Romans liked to assign to Eastern peoples. Some sources even suggest that Spartacus once served as an auxiliary soldier in the Roman legions, a role typically reserved for foreigners who supported Roman military campaigns. Yet something went terribly wrong. Perhaps he deserted. Perhaps he was betrayed. Whatever the reason, he was captured, tried, and sold into slavery. From that moment forward, Spartacus was thrown into the brutal shadows of the Roman system. But this man, trained as a soldier and hardened by hardship, would not break easily. After his capture, Spartacus was sent to one of the cruelest places in the Roman world, a gladiator school in Capua, run by a man named Lentulus Batiatus. These schools were essentially factories of death, where men were trained to fight and die in bloody arenas for public amusement. There, Spartacus came across others who had been condemned to the same fate, strong and brutal men, many of them criminals or prisoners of war. Spartacus, however, quickly stood out. Not only was he physically powerful, but he also had natural charisma and sharp strategic vision. His fellow gladiators, even the most violent, began to respect him. While most gladiators thought only of surviving each day, Spartacus quietly dreamed of escape. In the dim corridors of the school, away from the guards' eyes, he started forming secret alliances, watching, listening, and planning. What seemed at first like just a small group of doomed fighters slowly transformed into a network of rebellion. That moment came in 73 BC. Without access to swords or armor, Spartacus and about 70 gladiators launched a desperate escape. Armed with kitchen knives, makeshift spears, and raw courage, they overpowered the guards, raided the armory, and seized weapons and armor. Against all odds, they escaped into the countryside. Along the way, more runaway slaves joined them. Soon, the group chose 3 leaders, Spartacus, Crixus, and Oenomaus. Together, they combined tactical strength with leadership. But even then, Spartacus began to stand out as the true brain and soul of the rebellion. Their first clashes were against small Roman forces hastily sent by local magistrates. To Rome, these gladiators were just a minor nuisance. But Spartacus and his men fought with unmatched strength and training, easily destroying the Roman troops. What began as an escape had now grown into an open war. Rome didn't yet realize it, but it was about to face the biggest slave uprising in its history. As news spread across the countryside, enslaved men and women began fleeing estates and villas, rushing to join the rebels. Within weeks, that small band of gladiators had transformed into a rough but determined army. Poor farmers, shepherds with tools for weapons, escaped soldiers, criminals, and deserters all gathered under Spartacus's banner. For many, even a hopeless fight for freedom was better than living another day in chains. Spartacus led his followers to Mount Vesuvius, using its high ground as a strategic camp. Rome, stunned by this sudden threat, responded by sending the praetor Gaius Claudius Glaber with 3,000 men. Glaber thought it would be simple: surround the mountain, starve the rebels, and crush them. But Spartacus was not a predictable man. Using vines twisted into ropes, his men climbed down the steep sides of the mountain at night, slipping into the Roman rear where no one expected them. In a surprise strike, they attacked Glaber's forces from behind and wiped them out. The victory at Vesuvius gave Spartacus not only weapons but also confidence. His men were now armed and inspired. The rebellion spread rapidly. Spartacus marched across southern Italy, freeing slaves, looting Roman arsenals, and defeating every small force sent against him. More importantly, he brought order to his growing army. What had begun as a chaotic band became an organized force. He introduced formations, created chains of command, and drilled new recruits. Some accounts claim that Spartacus banned the hoarding of gold and silver, encouraging his men instead to collect iron to forge weapons. By now, the army had grown far beyond its origins. From only 70 gladiators, Spartacus commanded over 40,000 men, and their numbers swelled with each victory. Rome, humiliated, sent another praetor, Publius Varinius, with orders to finally put an end to the rebellion. But like his predecessor, Varinius underestimated Spartacus. He divided his army, a classic Roman tactic, thinking it would trap the rebels. Instead, Spartacus struck fast, taking advantage of the split forces. His army crushed Varinius's troops and even captured the consul's insignia, a stinging symbol of mockery. By the end of 73 BC, what began as a desperate escape had become one of the largest independent armies Rome had ever seen. Spartacus now led more than 70,000 men, and their numbers kept growing. Yet, instead of marching on Rome itself, he chose to stay in southern Italy, building fortified camps and reorganizing his army. Spartacus wasn't fighting for wealth. He forbade gold and silver, focusing instead on discipline and survival. His camp became something more than a rebel force, it was an armed movement. But with growth came cracks. The unity of the rebellion was tested, especially between Spartacus and his fellow leader, Crixus. Spartacus wanted to lead his people north, across the Alps, to disperse the Roman pursuit and allow his followers to return home. For him, the fight was about freedom and survival. Crixus, however, demanded revenge. He wanted to keep attacking Rome, to burn cities, punish masters, and challenge the Republic directly. The disagreement was final. Crixus broke away with around 30,000 men. But his gamble ended in disaster. Roman consul Lucius Gellius Publicola trapped and destroyed his force near Mount Garganus. Crixus and most of his men died in the bloody battle. For Spartacus, it was both a personal and political tragedy. Losing Crixus meant losing a brother in arms, but it also weakened the rebellion. To honor him and send a chilling message, Spartacus forced 300 Roman prisoners to fight to the death as gladiators, this time for the slaves' revenge. Even then, Spartacus continued to defy Rome. He defeated 2 more Roman armies separately, using speed and surprise. At one point, he commanded nearly 120,000 men, crushing Roman divisions one after another. His tactics were sharp, ambushes, flank attacks, and terrain advantage. Each victory humiliated the Republic. But inside the rebel army, discipline was crumbling. It was a vast and mixed force, newly freed slaves, angry peasants, deserters, tribes from different lands. Many fought for different reasons, some for freedom, some for revenge, some for loot. Spartacus held it all together through charisma and leadership, but it was fragile. The Senate now turned to Marcus Licinius Crassus, Rome's wealthiest man, ruthless and cold. He built discipline back into the Roman legions with brutal punishments, even reviving the ancient practice of decimation, executing 1 in 10 soldiers for cowardice. Crassus would do whatever it took to crush the revolt. Spartacus knew the noose was tightening. His only hope was to escape Italy by crossing into Sicily. There, he hoped to spark another slave uprising and rebuild his power. He negotiated with Sicilian pirates, paying them to ferry his men across. But betrayal struck. After taking payment, the pirates abandoned him. Stranded, Spartacus tried to build rafts, but Crassus blocked the entire coastline, trapping him. Then, in a bold move, Crassus ordered a massive fortification, a 60-kilometer wall of trenches and barriers across the peninsula, cutting Spartacus off completely. His men were starving, supplies dwindling, morale crumbling. Still, Spartacus refused to surrender. In front of his army, he killed his own horse, declaring that if they won, he would have plenty more, and if they lost, he would no longer need one. It was both a gesture of courage and farewell. In a desperate last attack, Spartacus led his men to smash through part of Crassus's fortifications. They reached the banks of the Salaris River, where they faced the Roman legions in one final stand. Spartacus fought with fury, killing 2 centurions and driving toward Crassus himself. He wanted to strike at the very heart of Rome's power. But fate was against him. He was mortally wounded, yet even as he fell to his knees, he kept fighting, swinging his sword until his final breath. His body was never found, but his name lived on. The rebellion collapsed. About 6,000 survivors were captured and crucified along the Via Appia, the road from Capua to Rome. Their deaths were staged as a warning to all. This was the fate of those who defied the Republic. When the war ended, Pompey returned from Hispania, too late to fight Spartacus but quick to claim credit in the Senate for ending the rebellion. Crassus, though the real architect of Rome's victory, gained a reputation for cruelty. Yet Spartacus remained unforgettable. He was the slave who dared to challenge Rome, the gladiator who became a general, and the leader whose dream of freedom outlived him. His story still echoes as a symbol of resistance against oppression. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and as always, may Mars guide you in battle.